Arya moved methodically with her mop, her movements practiced and efficient after 2 years of the same routine. Her short black hair, wrapped neatly at the back of her head, caught the light as she worked her way toward the entrance. She had learned to find peace in the simplicity of cleaning, the rhythmic swish of the mop, the satisfaction of seeing surfaces gleam. It was honest work, and after everything that had happened with Marcus, honest was all she wanted. Marcus. Even thinking his name made her chest tighten. "You're just a poor girl with nothing to offer," he'd said before walking out of her life. 2 years later, those words still echoed. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Arya from her thoughts. She glanced up and felt her breath catch, as it did every time she walked in. Alara Montgomery was impossible not to notice. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was, a billionaire CEO who had built her empire from the ground up. But it wasn't the confidence that made Arya's pulse quicken. It was the way Alara's long chestnut brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, the way her tailored pink corporate suit fit her like it had been designed specifically for her body, the way her full lips curved into the slightest smile when she ordered her usual coffee. "Good morning, Sarah," Alara said to the barista, her voice smooth and warm like honey. Arya quickly looked away, focusing intently on the floor near the entrance. She told herself it was ridiculous, this flutter in her stomach every time Alara appeared. They existed in completely different worlds. Alara was successful, powerful, radiant. Arya was just the girl who cleaned the floors. Lost in thought, Arya didn't hear the approaching footsteps. She took a step backward with her bucket just as Alara turned from the counter with her coffee in hand. The collision was inevitable. Time seemed to slow as the bucket tipped, water cascading outward in a glittering arc. Arya watched in horror as the water splashed directly onto Alara's immaculate pink suit, soaking the fabric and dripping onto her designer heels. "Oh my God," Arya gasped, her face burning with mortification. I didn't." But Alara wasn't moving. She stood perfectly still, water dripping from her suit, her green eyes fixed on Arya with an intensity that made the air feel thick. 1 minute passed. Then another. Alara just stared, her lips slightly parted, as if seeing Arya for the first time. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. Why wasn't she saying anything? Why was she looking at her like that? "Sorry, ma'am," Arya finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. It wasn't intentional." Alara blinked, seeming to return from wherever her mind had gone. Then, to Arya's absolute shock, she smiled. Not a polite smile, but a genuine one that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "It's okay," Alara said softly. She set her coffee cup on a nearby table and stepped closer, seemingly unbothered by her soaked clothing. "These things happen. What's your name?" "Arya," she replied quietly, unable to meet those piercing green eyes for more than a second at a time. "Arya," Alara repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. "That's beautiful. I'm Alara." "I know," Arya said before she could stop herself, then immediately wanted to disappear into the floor. "I mean, you come here often. Everyone knows who you are." Alara's smile widened. "Do they?" She glanced down at her ruined suit, then back at Arya. "How long have you worked here, Arya?" 2 years, ma'am." "Please, just Alara." She tilted her head slightly, studying Arya with an openness that felt both thrilling and terrifying. 2 years, and I'm ashamed to say I never properly noticed you before." Arya's cheeks flushed deeper. "I'm just the cleaner. There's no reason you would." "Just the cleaner?" Alara's expression shifted, something like disappointment flickering across her features. "I don't think anyone is just anything, Arya." The way Alara said her name sent a shiver down Arya's spine. There was something in her tone, something warm and interested that Arya couldn't quite identify. "I really am sorry about your suit," Arya said, desperate to break the strange tension building between them. "It looks expensive, and It's just clothing," Alara interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "It can be replaced. Besides, She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. I have a dozen more just like it at home. The hazards of being boring and predictable with my wardrobe. Arya found herself smiling despite her embarrassment. You're boring. The words escaped before Arya could censor them, and she immediately bit her lip, mortified. But Alara's eyes lit up with something that looked suspiciously like delight. No. Alara asked, her smile turning playful. What am I then? Arya opened her mouth, then closed it again, completely at a loss. What was she supposed to say? That Alara was stunning? That she'd spent 2 years stealing glances at her? That sometimes Arya timed her cleaning schedule just to be in the cafe when Alara arrived? I should get you some towels, Arya stammered, seizing on the excuse to escape this increasingly dangerous conversation. But as she turned to hurry away, Alara's hand caught her wrist. Just a gentle touch, nothing forceful, but it stopped Arya in her tracks like she'd been rooted to the spot. Wait, Alara said softly. When Arya turned back, Alara released her immediately, as if realizing the intimacy of the gesture. I'd like to talk more sometime. Would that be all right? Arya's heart was doing acrobatics in her chest. Talk. With me? Yes, with you, Alara said, amusement dancing in her eyes. Unless you'd prefer I talk to myself, which I do quite enough of already. Yes. Okay. Arya had no idea what she was agreeing to, but the word had left her mouth before her brain could catch up. Good. Alara pulled out her phone. I'm going to be late for a meeting if I don't leave now, but I'll see you again soon, Arya. I promise. And with that, Alara grabbed her coffee and walked toward the exit, leaving a trail of water droplets behind her. At the door, she turned back one more time, her eyes finding Arya's across the cafe, and gave a small wave that made Arya's stomach flip. As the door closed behind Alara, Arya stood frozen, mop still in hand, her mind spinning. Sarah, the barista, appeared at her elbow with an expression of pure disbelief. Did that just happen? Sarah asked, her voice hushed with awe. Did Alara Montgomery just flirt with you? She wasn't flirting, Arya protested weakly, but even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Girl, she stood there dripping wet for 2 full minutes just staring at you. That's not normal behavior. Arya shook her head, forcing herself back to reality. People like Alara Montgomery didn't flirt with people like her. It was ridiculous to even entertain the thought. Alara was probably just being kind because Arya had doused her with dirty mop water. But as Arya returned to her cleaning, she couldn't stop replaying the encounter in her mind. The way Alara had looked at her, the gentleness in her touch, the promise to see her again. I'll see you again soon, Arya. I promise. For the first time in 2 years, Arya felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not the sharp pain of heartbreak she'd grown accustomed to, but something softer. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. 3 weeks passed, and Alara kept her promise. She came to the cafe every morning, always at the same time, always with that same warm smile when her eyes found Arya. They'd started having brief conversations. Nothing deep, just small talk about the weather, about the cafe's new pastries, about nothing and everything at the same time. Arya found herself looking forward to those moments with an intensity that scared her. She'd arrive at work earlier just to make sure she'd be there when Alara walked in. She'd changed her cleaning route, so she'd be near the front counter during Alara's usual time. She told herself it was pathetic, this quiet longing for a woman so far out of her reach, but she couldn't seem to stop. Alara, for her part, seemed to seek Arya out just as deliberately. She'd moved from her usual table to one closer to where Arya worked. Sometimes Arya would catch her watching, those green eyes following her movements with an attention that made Arya's skin tingle with awareness. On the 23rd day after their collision, everything changed. Arya. Robert's voice boomed across the cafe. My office. Now. Arya's stomach dropped. Robert Matthews, the cafe owner, was a stocky man in his 40s with thinning hair and a perpetual sheen of sweat on his forehead. In 2 years, he'd barely spoken to her beyond basic instructions. Being summoned to his office couldn't mean anything good. She set down her cleaning supplies and made her way to the small office at the back of the cafe, her hands trembling slightly. Robert sat behind his cluttered desk, leaning back in his chair with his fingers steepled in front of him. "Close the door," he said. Arya obeyed, unease crawling up her spine. "Sit down." She perched on the edge of the chair across from him, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Robert studied her for a long moment, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Then he smiled, showing too many teeth. "You know, Arya, you're a beautiful girl. Elegant. Well-kept." "Thank you," Arya said uncertainly, not sure where this was going. "You've worked here for over 2 years," Robert continued, leaning forward. "You take your job seriously. You do good work. Very good work." "I try my best, sir." "I've been thinking," Robert said, his smile widening. "It's time for you to move up in the world. You shouldn't be just a cleaner, Arya. A girl like you deserves more." Arya's heart leaped despite her discomfort. A promotion? After 2 years of scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets, maybe Robert had finally noticed her dedication. I'd be very grateful for any opportunity, Mr. Matthews." "I thought you might say that." Robert stood and moved around the desk, perching on the edge directly in front of her. "Too close. Much too close. I'm prepared to promote you to manager. Double your salary. You have your own office, manage staff, handle inventory. Think about it, Arya, no more mopping floors. No more scrubbing toilets. Respect. Money. Everything you deserve." It sounded too good to be true. Because it was. "There's just one small condition," Robert said, his voice dropping lower. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Arya's ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I need to know we have an understanding, an intimacy between us. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You know how it works." Arya jerked away from his touch, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her heart pounded with a mixture of disgust and fury. "What?" "Don't be naive, Arya," Robert said, his friendly mask slipping to reveal something uglier beneath. "You're a beautiful woman. I'm offering you an opportunity. All you have to do is be accommodating. Spend some time with me outside of work. Let me take you to dinner. See where things go." His eyes traveled over her body again, lingering in places that made her feel dirty. "We could have a lot of fun together." "No," Arya said firmly, standing up. "Absolutely not. That's sexual harassment, Mr. Matthews." Robert's expression hardened. "Sexual harassment? I'm offering you a promotion. A chance to better yourself. If you're not interested in advancement, that's your choice." "That's not what you're offering, and you know it," Arya said, her voice shaking with anger. "You're trying to coerce me into sleeping with you. The answer is no. It will always be no." "I see." Robert moved back behind his desk and pulled out a paper from his drawer. "That's very disappointing, Arya. I thought you were smarter than that." He scribbled something on the paper, then held it out to her. "Here's your termination letter. Effective immediately." Arya stared at the paper in shock. "You're firing me? For refusing to sleep with you?" "I'm firing you for insubordination and poor performance," Robert said coldly. "That's what my letter says, and that's what I'll tell anyone who asks. Now get out of my office." "Please," Arya heard herself say, hating the desperation in her voice. "Mr. Matthews, please. This job, it's all I have. I need this income. I'll work harder. I'll take on extra shifts, just please." "Get out." Arya's legs gave out, and she found herself on her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, I'm begging you. I have rent to pay, bills." "You should have thought of that before you turned down my generous offer," Robert sneered. He walked around the desk and grabbed Arya's arm, hauling her to her feet. "I said get out. Don't make me call security." He shoved her toward the door. Arya stumbled, catching herself against the doorframe. Through her tears, she saw Sarah and the other staff members watching, their faces twisted with pity. She saw the other customers staring, whispering behind their hands. And she saw Alara, standing frozen near the entrance, her coffee cup halfway to her lips, her eyes wide with horror and fury. But Arya couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear Alara witnessing her humiliation, seeing her brought so low. She grabbed her bag from behind the counter and ran, pushing through the door into the bright morning sunlight, running until her lungs burned and her legs ached. She didn't stop until she reached her small apartment, where she collapsed on her threadbare couch and sobbed until there were no tears left.